Yeah, I mean, won't go through the whole story. Obviously, anybody who's read the book's gonna go through it. But I mean, it's basically he tells the story of the winter pageantry. It's a very Christian type story of like Jesus, and where Menda is born from the Virgin Mother, who's Periel, and then Menda goes and starts ridding the world of demons. Some people come and join him, and then the people who join him, he forgives them, kind of sets them on a path to become his disciples or priests.
And it's important they get a choice. He gives them the choice. That's a very important part.
Yeah.
And he also
it seemed like an obvious choice to me.
Except that he hits people in the face with a hammer.
Yeah, but the alternative was to get hit in the face with a hammer and get no relief. So it seemed like a pretty clear choice to me. If I'm going to get hit in the face with a hammer either way, and one gives me relief and one doesn't, I'm going to take the one that gives me relief. But, hey, people make stupid choices, so.
Is that where getting hammered came from? Like when you talk about?
Yeah.
Okay.
It came from this story. It's that recent. But then he hunts down demons and eventually has to hunt down Ecanis, and he does what he does. But the kind of the pieces we get, because the story seems like an amalgamation of different events, and the Ecanis seems like an amalgamation of different characters. So the story seems in some ways, it's very similar to Scarpi's story. There's like these 6 cities that Ecanis destroys, save one. Where in Scarpi's story, the Chandrian saves 7 cities, and except for one. One survives. So there's some similarity between that. But Trappist's story, he says it happened, he first says maybe 400 years ago, but then he's like, no, more than that, probably 1,000 years, but maybe not quite as much as that. So it sounds like that there's a second event that is very similar to the event that happened in Trappist's story. So it may be that the Chandrian failed the first time, and then they went for a second bite at the apple and tried it again, and Tehlu thwarted them the second time. Is what it kind of sounds like. I don't know if you guys, when you go through that, if it sounded like that to you, or if that's just something I picked up.
I did not pick up on that, but that makes sense, seeing as how there's a lot of different stories following the same storyline. There's inconsistencies in both. So, and it goes back to what we've said in past episodes, where the timelines could be circular, that there could be something going on to that where, Kvothe has been re-entered into another character in some sense.
I think that I can see it that way. There is something about the timeline that's really interesting. My first reaction to what Dan was saying there is that I've sort of looked at these stories as almost being like different versions of the same story. How we have different religions. Sure. It's almost like Muslims, Buddhists, Christians. They have different versions of similar stories.
Yeah, Scarpi's story, this story, Hespa's story about Ajax stealing the moon, Tellurian's story. They all seem like they're all telling either different versions of the same story, or they're telling different parts of the same story. The same big story, and they're just telling like different sections of this same story. It all seems like that all these little stories that we get are all filling in the details of the bigger history of the world. They all seem to be either telling it in a slightly different way, or just telling a different part of the story.
Yeah.
When we get far enough along, I'd like to, if all 3 of us can maybe work on it, and give like a side-by-side synopsis of the 4 different stories that have been told. And it may not come till we're in the second books, but Do you see what I'm saying? Where we can
Yeah,
line up kind of the similarities.
Well, yeah, we're definitely going to dive deep. Every time we come across one, like there's a ton of stuff I want to talk about in this one to kind of flesh it out. But I think it's either a version of Scarpy's story that he's telling, but the fact that he's pretty fucking sure that it's humans and humans didn't exist in Scarpy's story. He's pretty sure it's humans, and he's pretty sure it's, somewhere between 400 and 1,000 years ago. Makes me think that maybe the Chandrian have almost achieved their goal a couple times of, if their goal was to destroy the world, maybe they've almost done that twice. And one time it took Celatos to stop them, or whoever stopped that one city from being destroyed. In this one, maybe Tehlu came down and put an end to it. But it seems like they're telling, a very similar story, but it's kind of like they've almost achieved their goal a couple of times. And so they're just constantly trying to do the same thing. And, the angels and the Emir and the Scythe are trying to stop them. And they've been successful so far.
And perhaps Kavoth is the new Mender. Perhaps.
Could be, although Mender, seems to know who he is. It doesn't seem like he was ever blind to the fact
true.
He was Tehlu. And he became a man in a matter of months.
But it also goes back to what his mom said about when they're in the talking with Aventhy, and Aventhy, I guess they're teasing I'm sorry. Kvothes dad is teasing his mom, and his mom says, "Well, there was somebody that I met speaking to if Kvothe was actually a god."
Yeah.
So there was somebody who I met along the way, but he didn't have red hair.
Yeah, but she was talking about him. She was like, he bound me, to his will with corded music and corded kisses or something like that. But he didn't have red hair. She was talking about him. She was talking about Arleden. She was just kind of being cute. Yeah, I don't think Kvothe is a reincarnation of anything. Definitely does not seem to be the same as story of Mender. Mender becomes a 17-year-old man in 3 months.
Yeah, but if the story is just a retelling that's gotten all these different kind of things, where because if you think of it, it does line up with Kvothe in the way that Kvothe learns everything so fast and does grow up really fast. He's not doesn't grow up in 3 months, but when he's 16 years old, he's a hero.
Yeah, he doesn't seem to be born of a virgin mother or anything like that. I don't know. I don't see it.
I was just throwing out there for
like
loose speculation. But I think he's part of a larger. Again, man, it's that delicate, it's that interesting way where you can take it from two sides, because there seems to be an evil in the world that is being thrust back repeatedly, and there's a good, and there's these forces of good that seem to be represented by a Scarpy and a Chronicler, and these angels and these stories of Tehlu, and these stories of the Celatos and the Emir, and yeah, it's connecting all the dots and figuring out where Kvothe fits in, right? Because he's our vehicle. He's how we travel through the world.
Yeah.
What did he do to me?
Jesus, dude, this fucking joke is tired.
Played out already.
Very much. Well, I was going to say, a direct connection of the imagery of the story in itself. The wheel obviously is Kvothe killing the Dracus. That vision for people that know this story had to be insane, right? This is part of the reason why Kvothe is at the upper echelon of stories today, and everyone talks about him because of things like that. They think it's a demon running around all, fucking crazed on drugs, destroying a town. And there's this kid doing what he's doing on a burning tree and, jumping off of roofs and shit. And then this massive wheel and all this fire around slams into him. Hey, in terms of the imagery, it's off a church. I mean, you get much closer to this story.
Yeah. Yeah, and clearly, with everything he does in that town, and even just like the burning the coin on the table and all that kind of shit, he definitely leaves the impression that he is, working through Tehlu, or he's like a God's messenger type of dude. So, yeah, obviously we get the truth of the matter, but to them, they're seeing some biblical shit happen. We do, though. We get a couple of interesting things right off the bat in this story. They talk about like horses being lamed, which when they talk about it, they're like, but the worst thing in this time was that there were demons walking the land. Some of them were small and troublesome creatures who lamed horses and spoiled milk, but there were many worse than those. Like, that makes you think of the Scrael.
Yeah.
And then you had some demons stole the skins of men and wore them like clothes. Obviously, that makes you think of the skin dancers. So it gives you a picture of a world like what is happening to the world now. Like, this is, the world that they live in this story that he's telling. It seems like this is starting to happen again.
Yeah, we talked about that in one of the earlier episodes where we're making that connection where the Scrael's here for a reason. All these things are happening, so it's something. Kavoth opened up a door somehow, and now demons, or what they label as demons, are now coming through, and these things have been awakened. So it's something got triggered.
That lackless door.
Yeah. Could be.
Well, yeah, I think that's what's happened, and you also had when Tehlu, he is sending the demons back. It says, like, Tehlu grabbed the demon and broke it in his hands, cursing its name and sending it back to the outer darkness that is the home of its kind. That makes me think Tehlu in these moments when he's sending these demons back, he was sending them behind the doors of stone.
See, but he says that. I noticed that too. But then, like, in the next paragraph, he says he goes around to the different towns and finds the demons and destroys them. I didn't know if outer darkness was a, just maybe some kind of portrayal of death, or if he actually destroys them.
Well, the fact that there's Scrael and skin dancers coming in the world right now makes me think that he didn't destroy them permanently. He sent them behind the doors of stone.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know where it lands, but
it seemed like, when I read that this time through, I remember my feeling was, there's certain things that are going to this area, to this land, that we're not familiar with. Other people that have demons in them, they're saved, basically. It's the demons that are extricated, right, or exorcised, however you want to visualize it or talk about it. But yeah,
well, some of them are just demons wearing human skin. They're not human anymore.
Yeah,
the human is dead.
Well,
some, it seems like some are possessed by demons, but some are demons pretending to be humans.
Well, that's Ecanis, right? I mean, he's one of those.
No, that's like the skin dancers.
Okay.
Like that, you couldn't remove the skin dancer from that soldier and he would be fine again.
Oh yeah.
No, that dude's dead. The skin dancer is just wearing his skin.
Gross.
So that's kind of the difference between possessed versus you're dead and he's just wearing your skin. So I think that's kind of the difference between those two. But all right, Fitz, here's where Ecanis is at least a partial description of Haliax. I think they describe Ecanis as many different people. So that's why I say it's an amalgamation. It says, like, Ecanis, the swallowing darkness, no matter where he walked, shadows hid his face. and scorpions that stung him died of the corruption they had touched. So that clearly is, a description of Heliax. No matter where he walked, shadows hid his face. Swallowing darkness. It's a very clear description of Heliax. They're going to go through some more, but before we go into the rest of those, just kind of go through some of these things in order. They say about Periel. Now, here's what's interesting, is the Tehlu religion, there are groups that are Menders. There's a part where Lauren asks Kavoth about the Mender Heresies, and he's like, it was an easy question, blah, blah, blah. So they just kind of hint at there's a split between the Tehlu church, and you have some people that worship Menda, and they're the Menders. Mayor Alvaron talks about, like, when he was searching for the Amir, he found a Mendery, which an old church, an old Mendery that had old church records. That's where he was searching for the Amir. So there's very, like, little casual mentions of Menderies, Menders, the Mender Heresies, and so there was a split in the church. And so Trappist, we have confirmation from Patrick Rothfuss that Trappist is an adherent of the Mender religion. So he's a disciple of it, or a priest of it, or a follower of it. One of those where he's following this. He's a heretic, basically, of the Tehlu. According to the Tehlans, he's a heretic. But the Mender religion it seems to be like kind of a split between either like Catholics and Protestants, or Christians and Jews, whereas like the Menders believe Menda is, God in human form. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Is that you guys following me?
Yeah, I immediately started thinking, like, it could be just like Calvinist. I mean, it's just these different sects of religious belief. The smallest difference, they split and they don't agree with one another. I see where you're going.
Yeah. So there's a big split, and the reason I bring that up is because Periel, who, according to the Menders, is basically like the Virgin Mary. But this brings back to when Kavoth sang that rhyme about the Lackless family and his mom got mad at him. There's a little throwaway line that kind of fills in some details on this split. It said, like, I seem to be out of trouble, but I couldn't keep from asking. How is it any different than parts of For All Is Waiting? Like when Fane asked Lady Periel about her hat. I heard it from so many men, I wish to see it for myself and try the fit. It's pretty obvious what he's really talking about. So, in this story that...
Are you going to explain how it's obvious? Because it's not obvious to me.
Yeah. So, this is Kavoth talking. Kavoth's the one that says pretty obvious.
Okay.
So Kavoth is... Okay, so let me step back. So when Kavoth said the poem about his mom, and his mom got real mad at him, and she talked about the sexual innuendo of the poem, he was like, well, how's it any different from For All Is Waiting? And then he read a verse from All Is Waiting. He says, like, when Fane asked Lady Periel about her hat, and one of the verses in that story was, I heard it about from so many men, I wish to see it for myself and try the fit. Like, he's talking about her hat, where he's obviously talking about that poontang.
Yeah. Now I understand.
And so he said, that's where he's saying it's pretty obvious what he's really talking about. So he's talking about that poontang.
And he's talking about Lady Periel's, that line is talking about Lady Periel being
correct.
With many
yeah,
men?
it's basically implying that Lady Periel is a promiscuous whore
rather than being a virgin. Yes.
Yeah. And so I think that you have one group that see her as the Virgin Mary, and then you have another group that's trying to portray her as a as a floozy, and clearly she didn't get impregnated by Tehlu, by God. She was just a stupid whore that wanted to make an excuse for why she got pregnant. That's how I kind of assume the story is. It's similar to people who mock Christianity and the Virgin Mary story. They're like, oh yeah, she got impregnated by God. And yeah, it's clear she wasn't just telling Joseph to appease him. So I think it's similar where you got like one group that's belittling her explanation for how she got pregnant, and others believe it's literal, that she literally was impregnated by God. So I think that's kind of the big split. An example of a Mender, though, is Martin, who was with Kavoth and Tempe and Dedan and Hespa. Martin was the tracker when they were hunting the bandits. Martin, when Kavoth was going psycho and stabbing the dead body to fuck up all those other guys, Martin starts praying, and he says, Tehlu, who was Minda, who you were, watch over me in Minda's name, Imperial's name, in Ordale's name, in Andon's name, watch over me. Ordale and Andon are also angels that join Aleph in Scarpy's second story. So, like, he sees Tehlu as God, he sees Periel as the Virgin Mary, and Ordale and Anda are angels working for Tehlu. So it just kind of flesh out the story for you. There's these two warring sides of this religion. They have different versions of it, and clearly the Taylans are the dominant version, where the Menda version, the story that Scarpy's telling, is a heretical story, same as what Scarpy was telling was seen as heretical. It's very dangerous. Seems like what he's telling these kids, like, this is a very dangerous story to be telling, because you're going to be seen as a heretic if you go out and start telling this story.
Well, hence also the who arrests them? Priest, right? Or priest of the church?
Yeah, Tehlan priest. Yeah, Taylans.
Yeah, interesting.
So that's like that split is the Taylans and the Menders.
So
is one of the big splits.
So Trappist is telling a Menden story, though, correct?
Yes, he's a adherent of that heretic version of the story.
Okay, these are very interesting observations, because I've always without even delving into it and making all the connections you're making, you feel it's there, because there's clearly different sects of these religions. You can feel it even if you're not reading in deeply, and the mythology's there because it gets reiterated by multiple stories. And the importance is clear, because if their society, it's important to the society, then and you're living within that society, therefore it has to be, important, because you're a member of the society, right? You're living within this.
So yes, like Trappist telling this story, it's viewed from the Taylans perspective. It makes him a heretic. So like what he's telling these kids is a heretical story. Okay, so like this is like same way the Tehlan priest put Scarpy in jail for what he was saying. I think they would throw Trappist in jail if they heard him telling this story. So obviously the Menders, they're persecuted for their beliefs. It's not just that they believe something that the other people, disagree with. They disagree to the point where they will throw you in jail for speaking this version of events.
And so you're taking a big risk telling these stories, obviously. Yeah. Which is interesting, because that shows in both cases they're underground. I mean, literally, Trappist is underground, but Scarpy's also, he's talking to kids. Which is interesting, because they're spreading the words to these people, these kids that can then spread the story. Right? But he's doing it in a bar. He's doing it to poor kids, just kids that show up, buy him drinks. Which, wow, yeah, if that's religious, that's also pretty suspicious, right?
Yeah, like Scarpy and Trappist both telling little kids stories that could get him in a lot of trouble is, you know, that, you know, even though like Trappist is taking care of, you know, poor orphans, like, you know, maybe don't tell them stories that if they repeat it, they're gonna get thrown in the clink with some priest that seemed to have a problem with touching little boys. Yeah. Maybe not the wisest path to take. Speaking of the path, the path that Tehlu tells people to go on, maybe the right path is not to tell kids these stories. But whatever, that's what they do. And then, you know, that's kind of like gives you a full picture of like the kind of a full picture, but it kind of gives you more of a picture of the break between the religions in this world.
How Tempe and his people, what's the name? The
Adem?
Yeah. How do they fall in largely with religion? Do we know?
Don't know.
We don't know where they lean. Is there anybody else that we know?
Doesn't seem like they're Talons or Mendez. Martin, we know, just from his thing, and we know like the Modeg, the what's the kind of arrogant little noble guy that's kind of friends with them.
Yeah, he's Modegan.
Drawing a blank on his name. Doesn't matter if you know what I'm talking about. It's the guy. When he first meets him, like he's missing his rings, and
he also knew Denna.
Yeah, he dated Denna. That he was dating Denna
Deanna
on a date with her when he sang the song that got him his talent pipes. That guy, he talks about like you guys have the like foreign gods or weird gods or something. Your gods are all queer or something like that. Like, so it's and some things Willem says, it seems like they have different gods. Willem and the Modegs don't have the same gods as them.
Willem's Sealdish?
Yeah. Yeah, he's like Kilvin, Master Kilvin.
Yeah.
So it seems like there's different gods in different parts of the world, but like the Talons seem to be like the dominant religion, and then there's a split between the people who view Tehlu as God.
What about
the Talons and then the Menders?
What about Mayor Alvaron?
At the parts that we see him, I don't get a sense that he's super religious, but you know, I'll more to say on that later. There's too much to go into on it at this moment, but you know, possibly later when we come across some stuff, I'll talk more about that. But right now, it just wouldn't make any kind of sense. But then one of the other things I wanted to mention is kind of the differences between the Orthodox Talon religion and the heretics. You had Martin, who's like Tehlu, who was Menda, who you were. Like Nina, the girl that gave Kavoth the parchment that had the picture of some of the Chandrian on it, and also had one of the Amir, the Seer Day on it. She says, "It seemed the best thing since an angel gave me the dream, and they can't lock the church up properly at night since you tore the front off of the building and killed that demon." She reached over and brushed at the paper with a finger. "It ain't that hard. All you need to do is take a knife and scrape at it a bit, and all the words come off." She pointed. "I was careful never to scrape off Tehlu's name, though, or Andin's, or any of the other angels," she added piously. I looked at it more closely and saw it was true. She'd painted the Amir so the words Aden and Ordal rested directly on top of his shoulders on each side, almost as if she were hoping the names would weigh him down or trap him. So she used their Bible to draw the pictures on, and she scraped off the words with a knife, but she left all the names down. And so like that Seer Day guy, she had, when she scraped it away, the Seer Day guy was painted with Ordal and Andin over both of his shoulders. So it shows you that the Talons also, their religions are very similar, where they still see Ordal and Andin as angels of Tehlu. It seems like the only big difference is whether Periel was a virgin mother or not.
When you say Ciridae guy, is that the Judge Dredd dude you're talking
Yes.
about? Yeah, okay.
Yes.
That was also on the pot, right? Moth and Farm.
Yes. Yeah. Correct. Yeah. Yeah.
I'm sorry. I'm still not certain who that is.
The Ciridae?
Yeah.
The Ciridae were the portion of the Amir that had ultimate authority. Like, they were judge. Yeah. Yeah. Like, when he goes and he sees Ari, when his hand was all bloody and everything, and she sees him and she's like, "You look like a Ciridae." And then he says something that scares her off, and then when she comes back, he's like, "I'm sorry," and she's like, "No, you're my Ciridae. You're beyond reproach." So, like, these people were unquestioned. Whatever they said, people assumed that even if they disagreed with it, they would assume that they knew more than they did. They were beyond reproach. So they were like judge, jury, executioner in this world as part of the Amir.
Okay.
All right. So then with that story, when Tehlu, he goes, when he becomes Menda, he's born through Periel in a virgin birth, and then the townspeople come through and they start questioning her about her, this kid she just had that he grew to manhood in a matter of months, and they're thinking maybe she slept with a demon, and they're ready to burn her house down, and Menda, who's Tehlu, steps out, and he just lays down the law with these people. He tells them who he is, and he tells them, you can either join me, and you're going to feel pain now, but you're going to be with me from then on, or you can not join me, and you're going to feel pain forever. And so he gives them a choice that seems pretty fucking obvious to me. Pain now for peace later. I'm going to, if the alternative is pain forever, I'm going to choose pain now and peace afterwards. But 7 of these dumbasses decide not to. The ones that do choose the path, it kind of seems like he makes them priests. Like, he gives Rengen was the first one, and he's like, now you're Wereth, the forger of the path. So it seems like he makes priests out of them. But kind of what's interesting is there were 7 that turned him down, and one of them was a demon, wasn't even an actual human, so there were 6 of them left. The reason that's interesting is Jake, when they're talking about the Chandrian, Jake mentions that the first 6 to turn down Tehlu, to not go on his path, that's who was the Chandrian.
But he's one short, right?
Yeah, well, it's Haliax and then the 6 others. Yeah. And so the reason I find that interesting is because it does mirror the fact that there was, 7 demons, 6 humans that turned him down, and then Haliax. And Jake also interprets that as they're the Chandrian. It's how I would interpret it, just reading the text of the book, and then there's a character in the book that also interprets it the same way. It seems like he's talking about the Chandrian, the first 6 that turned down Tehlu's path.
Yeah, I thought the same thing in this read through. I mean, it's a pretty immediate connection, at least in my mind. And he draws in 7 repeatedly. He talks about chain. They celebrate the chain, which is the 7th day. He talks about leading into the 8th day when it was the 7th day where finally what's his face caught up to Ecanis. Tehlu caught up to Ecanis. Yeah. And then that's why they celebrate that day, and it's there's a lot of repetition of the
winter
7th.
Pageantry. Yeah. That's why 7 is such a big term. It's a lucky thing, which is weird because the Chandrian is 7, and so. But yeah, there's a lot of weird things that go with who the bad guys are and who the good guys are. But all right, here's the part I really wanted to get to. We kind of, delved enough into the religion. Our fucking hero, the hero of the podcast, is
Grey Dalcenti.
the great and almighty powerful Grey Dalcenti. He's clearly the hero of the story. He's going to come through as like the ultimate surprise hero. Like Kvot's going to be the bad guy. Grey Dalcenti is going to be the true hero of the story. I'm 100% confident in that. I think we get a little bit of information on who he is in this, because I say Ecanis is kind of an amalgamation of, I think it's an amalgamation of Haliax, the Chandrian, and the Cathay. I think there's parts of the story that fit very well with all of them. So, like, I'll give you an example. So it says, Ecanis, whose face was all in shadow. Ecanis, whose voice was like a knife in the minds of men. So, the face in shadow is clearly Haliax. But whose voice was like a knife in the minds of men, I think that's a possible Grey Dalcenti sign. So, you also get that when wherever Ecanis was going, he was killing crops and poisoning wells. So if you remember, you had Cyphus bears the blue flame, Sturkis is in thrall of iron, Ferul chill and dark of eye, Usnea lives in nothing but decay, Grey Dalcenti, superhero, never speaks. Pale Alenta brings the blight.
So is that...
So, like, killing crops, poisoning well, that seems like Pale Alenta. She brings the blight. Or Usnea, nothing but decay, as far as, those two things. But the knife in the minds of men, the driving crazy, the reason I think that might be the sign of Grey Dalcenti is it also talks about, like, with Ecanis, he felt the chill of Ecanis passing and could spy places where he had set his hands and feet, for they were marked with cold, black frost. That sounds like Cinder.
Yeah.
Okay, and so the poisoning well and crops, that sounds like Usnea or Pale Alenta, who brings the blight. So it sounds like they're talking about the different members of the Chandrian, but then they keep talking about, like, driving people crazy and shit. And so there's one part where he's talking to that girl. She talks about, like, she saw, this isn't on one of the parts she drew. This is the first time she meets him. When she comes up to his room, he's like, hey, anybody who saw anything about the farm, come fucking talk to me. And she comes up to talk to him, and she just tells him one of the parts she sees. This isn't one of the parts she drew. But she says she saw mostly people. There was a woman holding a broken sword, and a man next to a dead tree, and another man with a dog biting his leg. So there's many things, like, even when he's talking about with Abinthy, he's like, they talk about, like, animals going crazy. And in this, they talk about, knife in the minds of men, and they talk about setting men to murder one another, stealing children from their beds at night. There's a lot of talk about, when the Chandrian around, people and animal going crazy. And everybody else has pretty fucking clear signs. Grey Dalcenti doesn't speak, but I think he either telepathically drives people and animals crazy, or if he does speak, he drives them crazy, and that's why he doesn't typically speak, because he fucking makes everyone crazy who hears his voice.
Which goes along with the Cathay?
No, that doesn't go with the Cathay. I'm saying Grey Dalcenti, I think, is not quite the big frickin' puss that I initially thought he was. I think he might be the guy that drives everybody fucking mad. Because someone in the Chandrian drives animals and people crazy, and the only person who doesn't have a sign that makes any sense is the Grey Dalcenti, and I think it's not just that he never speaks, that he drives these animals and people crazy.
There's a word in this chapter that they say, I don't know if it's about the wheel, but they say the word is so horrible that you don't speak it.
Yeah, that's talked about.
So when I hear stuff like that, I mean, that's what I thought of when you're saying somebody's speaking. You could hear if he has a voice so horrible it drives people insane, or he says things that drives people crazy.
I think of like what the part you're talking about is they're like wrought all of black iron. The wheel stood taller than a man. It had 6 spokes, each thicker than a hammer's haft, and its rim was a handspan across. It weighed as much as 40 men and was cold to the touch. The sound of its name was terrible, and none could speak it. What that reminds me of is a sharp word not for swearing, or a word forsworn. Because I think it might fit in with the poem that maybe there's something to do with the name of this wheel that he used might play a part in the poem. I also think there's a part in here where they talk about when here it is. So you shall, Tehlu told her, and reached out, lay his hand on her heart. When he touched her, she felt like she was a great golden bell that had just rung out its first note. She opened her eyes and knew then that it had been no normal dream. So rung, like a ring that can't be worn. So you get a couple instances in this chapter of a ring that can't be worn. The other one is when he rings the iron will to fuck up Ecanis when he tries to lie to him. So there's a few parts that might be play into the poem that one of the poems Caboth's here.
There's a few times. So we talked about that before, where it could be either a bell that's rung or it could be a ring that's not worn. Or it shouldn't be worn. It's interesting because, in the side book, Ari's book, they talk about one of the gears, and it's like one of these things where it's like the bell or the wheel, it's hit and it rings like a bell. So there's multiple times where that's come in.
Yeah. I mean, I think the most likely still is the Ring of the Greystones, but there's still, like, he writes in enough things that give you doubt on what it could be. It could be so many multiple things because of the way he writes the story. There's a lot of rings that can't be worn. Like, that's why there's, people have multiple interpretations of it. And he just, so much of what he writes, there's multiple interpretations. But the other part I wanted to bring in was the Cathay, where I think the Cathay fits in is it was Tehlu bent and with great effort lifted one edge of the wheel and set it leaning against a tree that grew nearby. So he pins Ecanis against a tree, and he's trapped against this tree. And while he's against this tree, he commanded him to not tell a lie, and he was not able to lie. And that fits perfectly with the Cathay, who's trapped in a tree, and he can't lie. He always tells the truth. So there's the signs mirror the Chandrian. There's clearly multiple mentions of signs that fit with Haliax. There's the tree and the can't lie that fits with the Cathay. So I say it's an amalgamation of them. And then also, when he catches the Ecanis in a lie the second time, Ecanis finally was like, my path then, I do not regret. If I had my choice again, I would only change how fast I ran. Your people are like cattle my kind feed on. Bite and break you. If you gave me half an hour, I would do such things that these wretched, gawping peasants would go mad with fear. I would drink their children's blood and bathe in women's tears. That sounds like the fucking Cathay. That doesn't sound like Haliax. Especially the bite and break you, because they talk about, like, when Caboth comes back after talking to the Cathay, and he comes back to Felurian, the first thing she checks is to see if he was bitten. And so that bite and break you, she was worried that he was broken. Bite and break you seems to fit with what the Cathay does to people.
And breaks their mind, too.
Yeah, exactly.
I was thinking Cinder when I heard that part, just because he goes full on, like, unrestrained evil, which is what Cinder is. I mean, that's what he, like, represents. But
the Cathay more so, like, the Cathay, if he talks to people, his goal is to set them down the worst possible path they can go to. He tears butterfly wings apart just out of pure spite and malice. Like he is, and Bass sees him as like the ultimate bad, the most evil fucking person there is. That sounds like something, just that I do not regret. If I had my choice again, I would only change how fast I ran. Your people are like cattle my kind feed on. That doesn't sound like how Cinder was talking. That sounds like how the Cathay was talking to Kavod.
So if he's an amalgam, that what Tehlu does to him here is he dissipates the evil, and the evil spreads to multiple things.
So the way I treat it as is, I think that either it's a combination of Scarpy's story of the creation war and like Tehlu stopped the Cathay, or it is something that happens later where he has to stop the Chandrian, and then he Tehlu is the reason the Cathay is stuck in a tree. He can't get out, and he's just watched by the scythe, and he can't go anywhere. Like, I think it might be just telling us how the Cathay got where he got, and maybe like there's a second battle with the Chandrian beyond the Creation Wars.
So it's
tough to say because we don't. The story is not real.
I was going to say, so it's almost like a combination of different events that the story represents, but it's not necessarily tying all the loose ends.
Yeah. I think it's trying to give us a little bit fuller picture, but it's just doing it in a very, very subtle way. But it does. Like, if you look deep, you learn about the Mender Heresies, the difference between the Talons and the Menders. You see the amalgamation of the Chandrian, Haliax, the Cathay. You maybe find out that Tehlu's the reason that the Cathay's in the tree. Maybe find out that the badass fucking Grey Delcinti can fucking make people insane. Like, so there's little pieces that you can pick up from this story that are super fucking subtle.
So along those same lines, I'll throw in, because the last part of the story was Tehlu dies. He burns with Ecanis. He burns with him, and Ecanis says to him, "You're gonna die just like me." And Tehlu says, "Actually, no. Everything goes back to ash, and when I want to, or when I'm needed, I'll come right back." So
yeah,
saying if that's a clue that he'll come back, it could go along with what we're saying, where these heroic or anti-heroic characters come back around in the form of a new character or a new person.
Yeah, he could come back if needed. And I think he might have saved Kavoth's life when he was laying in the street about to freeze to death. So I think their imprint is still in the world, and Kavoth obviously talks to gods, he mentions, and possibly kills an angel. And so, yeah, I think there's more to come with Kavoth versus Tehlu.
Before he starts telling his story to chroniclers, when he says that, right? That I'm someone who's spoken to gods.
Well, there's two parts. Like, Kavoth mentions that he's spoken to gods, but Chronicler's the one in his head thinks, this is the man I came to see. This is the man that, tricked a demon to get back his heart's desire and
killed
an
angel.
Fight an angel to keep it. This is a man who's, This is a man who's killed an angel.
Yeah. Excellent.
So at the end of Trappist's story, he gets cut off. And he says, and this is how we know Tehlu cares for us, watches us, and keeps us safe from. And that's where it cuts off.
Yeah.
Is he about to say Chandrian?
Chandrian, maybe the Cathay. Demons would be my guess.
Grey Delcinti.
Yeah.
But that's why he can't say it. He's silenced.
That's it. He was going to say the Grey Delcinti, but part of the Grey Delcinti's power is when you go to say about him, you're going to get interrupted and you're going to get silenced.
So his power is being shown right here.
Yeah. he made those other kids go mad and start spazzing out, and that's why he wasn't able to fucking say his name.
Probably the reason why my computer crashed when you started to talk about him.
Yeah.
It's that powerful.
Mm-hmm.
Grey Dalcenti, man. He is the man.
So now the merch is Silent Man in the back, in gray, straight jacket.
I think it's Grey Dalcenti bent over laughing as a dog is humping someone's leg.
That's very, very inside baseball.
Yeah. I think that's a gold. That's gold, Jerry. That's gold.
Well, shit, man. That's very interesting to finally get more about this enigmatic Grey Dalcenti.
Yeah.
That actually makes some sense.
Yeah, it makes more sense that he's the guy that drives animals mad or drives people mad than he's just a socially awkward Chandrian who doesn't talk. He's got to have something more to bring to the table of the fucking Chandrian than I just sit by the side and I don't talk. I hold all my words in.
So is there, to go down that road, there's the crookery, right? There's guys that delve into sympathy that lose their minds.
Yeah.
There's, do we have tangible examples of, you're saying there are examples of people that, and he says it in this story, Trappist talks about in this story of driving men to murder, animals going crazy, things of that nature.
Yeah, and even Aventhy, when he was talking to Kavoth's parents, Arladin and Lorien about the Cathay, not the Cathay, the Chandrian, one of the signs he mentioned was animals fucking going crazy. So there's multiple mentions of things going crazy, and this is the first where you're getting, you get clear examples of different Chandrian signs, and then there's just one sign of people and animals going crazy, and the only guy who doesn't have a sign is, the Grey Dalcenti, and that would fit that he's the guy that drives them all fucking mad. Which, if you've ever been around, someone who's super socially awkward, they kind of fucking drive you a little mad. You feel uncomfortable being around them.
Yeah, it makes you uncomfortable.
Yeah.
I think we cracked it.
Yeah, crack that nut.
Mm-hmm.
So he's not a lumberjack.
No,
I'm a little disappointed.
But he could still be a lumberjack.
Maybe he drives lumberjacks crazy enough that they just start chopping down the trees that he wants them to.
Yeah, just random trees.
Yeah, he made lumberjacks crazy where they just start chopping trees that would block the road.
Yep.
It's
all
hard
coming together.
That's a hard one to make a connection on when not once in the story are lumberjacks mentioned.
Well, you know why? Because Grey Dalcenti has put the silence on him.
I think I've covered everything in that chapter that I want to cover. Obviously, next week we'll get into Scarpy stories, and then there's definitely more to dive in deep on those.
This is what I've been
I'm curious if you had a note that said poontang. If you had that,
I didn't.
Particular.
That was improv.
That verb
that
choice,
or that improv.
That particular.
I don't even remember
I guess it's a pronoun.
I don't even remember when I brought up poontang, what it was in reference to.
Periel.
It was Periel's hat.
Oh yeah.
Periel
We'll see if it fits.
Yeah, Periel poontang.
And then I think
That's
the second time you called it P-tang.
That's more merch. Periel poontang, man. That shirt, merch is just flying out of the show every episode.
Jesus.
All right, well, let's wrap it up then, because people are looking forward to hearing Scarpy's stories, I'm sure, and having us get into them.
All right.
I know I am. So have a good one, guys. We'll talk to you next week.
See ya.
Yep.